from California to participate in this year's Girls Who Click, and we're doing a one-day event at the Eagle River Nature Center. We've just reserved the education yurt. It's going to be on June 15th, and I am looking for photography volunteers to help me with these girls. Carl has offered his van, which will hold 10 photographers. So I figured that we can all pile in cars to drive up there for the day, but we're looking for people. The way we had it set up before was we set up a scenario that, and we'll probably do the same thing at the Nature Center. This is not real, just so everybody knows. There's this area here at the Eagle River Nature Center that they just want to clear cut and either put in a golf course or something totally insane. And it's the girls' responsibility to go out. We're going to break them into groups of 3 or 4 and have them work with a photographer or 2 if we have enough volunteers to come up with images that will protect this area or show to people that this area is worth protecting and not putting this in. And I just thought of the golf course because that happened at Russian Jack. They wanted to put in a 16-hole or however many holes you have with golf and make it a big golf, Tiger Woods' size golf course. And there was about 100 people that showed up that said, no, you're not. We love this park. We love nature. We love being able to take our kids here. And so the idea is to get the kids to go out and shoot, people enjoying the outdoors, the trails, the beauty, macro photography. And then we bring them back into the education yurt. And we did this with the Girl Scouts, and Glenn was great at helping the girls. We downloaded the pictures, and then they gave, each group gave a presentation on why they think that the place should be saved and what their pictures are trying to tell you as a story. So, that was a bad mouthful. So it's going to be on June 15th. It's going to be an all-day event, and it will be at the Eagle River Nature Center. And if anybody is interested in helping me, male or female, I don't care which, if you could let me know tonight, and I'll write your name down on the list. And then as we get the program outlined, we'll just get all the logistics together. The National Parks Conservation Association, last year, we're going to sponsor the kids with each child getting a National Parks book, and they were going to sponsor lunch. So I'm going to get with them soon to see if they'll do that again this year. And then the Girls Who Click program, you can look them up by just going to girlswhoclick.org and see what they're all about. I've had this mentee with me now for 3 years, and now she's gotten her dream job doing photography and writing. So that makes me feel very good. So anyway, let me know. And any questions on that? Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about is Clean Air Challenge with the American Lung Association is looking for photography support. This would be a volunteer program. And they just sent me this blurb. The American Lung Association is looking for up to 2 photographers to join them in Talkeetna on May 11th for the 40th anniversary of the Clean Air Challenge. The event is a peer-to-peer fundraiser for the American Lung Association. Participants will be riding 100, 60, 26, and 10 miles, and others will be walking and running a 5K. Riders will travel from the Talkeetna, Alaska Lodge up the Parks Highway and back. What they're looking for is to capture the magic of the riders as they take off, paddle, pedal, pedal, and when they return and cross the finish line. They're asking for a donation of services to join us on Friday night through Sunday morning. Lodging will be provided at the lodge for both nights, Friday and Saturday. Breakfast and dinner on Saturday are also provided. Amber, you're the one that sent this to me, right? Where are you at? And I have the information as far as how to contact them. Would the easiest way for me to do this is to put it on the e-news for this week? Okay, perfect. So if anybody's interested, check for the next week's e-news and it'll have all the information on it, or contact the American Lung Association in Anchorage direct. Okay. Colin, where's your book, Colin? So Colin has graciously offered to do a 2-day workshop at the Eagle River Nature Center. He just published this incredible book that we all love. I have a copy. And it's going to be on July 13th and 14th. July 13th from 2 to 10 at night, so you can get really nice light. And on the 14th from 10 to 5. The cost is going to be $250, and that includes a signed copy of Colin's book. So I think this is a really great opportunity. If you know anybody that's interested in taking the workshop or you're interested in taking it yourself, I'm going to be the first one to sign up. We will be taking deposits at the next meeting. What? Limited to 10 people. So, get your dates in early for that. Any questions on that? July 13th and 14th. Like my whole summer is so booked, it's ridiculous. One other thing, or there's two things. I haven't forgot you, Corey. We do have old books for sale in the back. If anybody's interested, 20% discount. And Jen, did you bring any books, the new books? And we have 2 copies of the new books here. Okay, so you can order them online? Is that what you're saying? Okay. Or we can take names and you can order them. Will you have books at the next meeting? Are we only taking books on order? Okay, great. Okay, thank you. And the last thing that I have is if anybody lives in the downtown area, Larry, this nice gentleman over here, he needs a ride home. And if anybody lives by me, I need a ride home. Can you guys give me a ride home on your way? Fantastic. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn this over to Doug, and he's going to announce our speaker for tonight. Thank you. Okay, you need this too. Great. Thanks, Gail.
All right. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. It's Loren Holmes. Loren Holmes is staff photojournalist with Anchorage Daily News. He's developed the drone program in 2017 for Anchorage Daily News. He's been with them for 12 years as a member, and that included being a member of the team that was awarded the Pulitzer Prize in 2020 for a project concerning eliminating inequities in law enforcement here in Anchorage. With that brief introduction, I'd like to introduce Loren.
It doesn't bother me. It's fine.
Turn it off.
There's that on this one also.
I've never worn so many microphones. Well, thanks everybody for coming. I was reminded today that I presented about drone photography many years ago to this group. So, well, I did present this once before, but I think it was to a different group over at UAA. So hopefully this is new to a lot of people. And I'd love to keep it informal. So if you have questions, just shout them out and we can just have a conversation. I'm going to go through sort of chronologically how I've explored using drones. So I'll start with some of the oldest stuff and work up to some things just from a few weeks ago. This is not a drone photo, but this was what got me interested in it. This is when I joined the Alaska Dispatch in 2012, we had a Cessna. Our owner, she was a pilot, and we would fly all over the place. And this is something I took out of the window of that plane and just got me hooked. I loved that perspective, and I just wanted to do more of it. So I convinced her to get to buy a drone, and proceeded to make some really boring photos like this, kind of cliche, but you know, it was still really fun. And I was really just exploring how to use this new technology, how to fly safely, what the limitations of the smaller sensor was. I mean, you can see this is really grainy, but it was opening up some opportunities in my brain. A lot of the first things I did was very graphic, you know, simple graphic kind of compositions. And I would just take it around and fly it wherever I was. So I would notice things that I wouldn't otherwise notice, like this hockey rink, or this old barn from a homestead in Bear Valley, just sort of tucked away in the trees there. Many people are probably familiar with this rugby field up in Potter Valley, but using the drone, you can just really put it in perspective. You can see where it is in the landscape, and it really helped tell that story. This was in Fish Creek in Kinnick. They had a dip net opening. So I'm the only one that flies the drone for the ADN, so I just had this as part of my kit. So I drive around with the drone in my car, and I take it out whenever the opportunity arose. This is the Muldoon overpass when it was under construction. And I was really trying to think of, like, how can I use this? What does this offer that you couldn't really do with a regular camera? And, you know, photographing a prison, you know, the Highland prison, that would be hard to do from the ground. And being above, you can kind of see things differently. Like, I'm sure the designer, whoever made this roundabout, like they saw this when they were sketching it out, but you don't really notice it until you're flying overhead. I had noticed the construction. This is over at Johns Road and Klatt area. And I thought it looked interesting. I thought there's probably more to see from above. So yeah. It's mesmerizing. I can just watch that for. This is what elevation is the drone? This is probably maybe 200 feet. And the FAA rules are you cannot go over 400 feet. So that provides a 100-foot buffer between a drone and a manned aircraft. They're supposed to stay above 500 feet. But it really opens up that whole space between 0 and 400 feet. It's pretty awesome. This is the South Anchorage Sports Park, just down the road from there, when it was under construction. When you're out flying, you notice things that, I mean, you would see this when you're driving by on Stuckaken Heights Road, but it'd be hard to photograph that unless you had a drone. I took it out to Point McKenzie and this rail extension. You know, spent hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's what, half built or something. It's just this weird part of the landscape now. This old boat out in Kinnick. The drone that we had, the first drone we had was an Inspire 2, so it was pretty big, you know, probably about this big. And really heavy. It had a micro Four Thirds sensor and interchangeable lenses, so it was really great image quality. And we had a 24 millimeter equivalent, 30 millimeter. This is the 30. and then a 90 millimeter equivalent. And that telephoto really offered a lot of creative opportunities. You know, this is probably 2017 that these photos were taken, and a lot of the times when you saw a drone photo, you could tell it was wide angle. It was, you know, not a lot of people are doing telephoto stuff, and I really like that look. This is the mass start of the Willow 300.
On that, what is the law for any race event, whether foot, bicycle, sled dogs? If it's a public event, can you photograph without getting participants authorization?
That's a great question. So since I'm working for the Anchorage Daily News, I don't ever need to get permission in a public place. You know, I'm working for the news. I'm covering a public event in a public place. We don't get permission. If it was a different situation, if I was selling, you know, prints or selling these photos to an advertiser, a sponsor, then that would be a different kind of situation. But for me, as a member of the news media, no, I don't need permission.
You know, just for the recreational user, not going to sell.
Well, I mean, in America, we have the First Amendment, and you are, you know, you don't have an expectation of privacy in public. So I would say you're well within your rights to take photos in public. Now, how you use them is another part of the story, but.
Told in a previous meeting years ago that it's illegal for us to use a drone in the Chugach National Forest. So anywhere between Kuna and Birdwood would be illegal. Is that still true?
Well, so there's the Chugach National Forest. The National Forest is administered by the Department of Agriculture. You can fly in the National Forest. The National Park, administered by the National Park Service, you cannot fly. And then there's the Chugach State Park, which is administered by state parks, and that you used to not be able to fly in the state park. They used their rules that applied to manned aircraft, which said basically you can only fly to the Eklutna Lake airstrip, and that's the only place you can take off or land in the park. But they've changed the rules since then. So my understanding, based on my conversation with the superintendent, is that you can fly in Chugach State Park. You may want to double check that before you do it, but that's my most recent understanding. Well, there's other considerations in the city close to airports. Since I'm flying for the Anchorage Daily News, it's considered a commercial use. Yeah, there's a moose. Okay, yeah. So I'm flying under, they're called Part 107 rules. So commercial use, since I'm getting paid to fly the drone, so I have to follow those rules. But if you're just flying as a hobbyist, the rules are a little different. But basically, when you're close to an airport, you have to get permission from to fly in controlled airspace. So here in Anchorage, right here at the BP Energy Center, this is Merrill Field airspace. So you would need to get permission from the Merrill Field officials. And there's an easy way to do that. You can just get on your phone. There's an app I use. It's called Aloft. And you can just say where you want to fly, and it gives you permission immediately. Did that answer?
So 0 to 400 feet above the land. So it's like a mountain. It's where the land is. Kind of
Yeah, 400 feet above ground level. So if you're flying, you know, if you take off from the Glen Alps parking lot, you could fly 400 feet above the terrain and end up at the top of Flat Top, and you're, you know, a couple thousand feet above where you started, but you're still only 400 feet above the ground. So that would be legal. under the FAA rules. I can pull it up and find it for you. It's on the FAA website. Yeah.
The drones have gotten really smart. For example, my drone, you won't even lift off anywhere military bases. You won't lift anything anywhere near these airports. You won't fly. Probably a good thing.
Right.
As far as the Chugach State Park, I do believe it's still illegal technically to take off the land in the park and fly over it if you take off land out of it. But I had a ranger one time tell me, you're not harassing people or wildlife. You're respectful. They don't care. There's other people around, don't play.
Yeah, considering Chugach State Park, if you wanted to do that, it might be good to just call them ahead of time and sort of explain what you want to do. But this was maybe a year or a year and a half ago that I was out with the superintendent, and I flew the drone with him. So.
Check our website, believe that the wording is clear. General rule is no, unless you've been permitted by.
Yeah, and I mean, when I first looked at it, there's this process you fill out a form, and you might have to pay a fee. And it's also, from what I understand, it's different from each park to park. Like when I was in Wood-Tikchik State Park, it's wide open. You can fly there. I think you can fly at Independence Mine, but it might be good to check the state parks DNR. Yeah.
Guys, no way to exclude the bird with them, so it's illegal.
So bird was actually too good. The boundary is go past the park. It's north of go past.
Park is off to the forest. You just don't check.
Yeah, my understanding is this national forest is okay to fly, national park, not okay to fly.
Okay, we're talking about this. What's the punishment if you're caught doing something wrong? Are they gonna take your thing away, or thank you, or send you to your room?
Well, so I flew at the ceremonial start of the Iditarod. And one of the other rules you have to follow is do not fly over people or moving vehicles. So I was flying here. You can see there's a big space between the crowd and the musher. So I was using that space to fly in. So I wasn't flying over people, but there was some FAA employees who were watching me, and I got to have a nice conversation with them afterwards. I went down to their office and talked about it. So the way I understand it is, if you break the rules, they will educate you. And if you break them again, then who knows, you could get in trouble. But there's a lot of education involved, I think, for first-time offenders. That's the way I understand it. I don't know what the punishment is. And I don't know what the Park Service would say either, so. I'll just let this play. This is some scenes from the trail there. We can continue talking, but.
You weren't flying over people, so you were okay? Or?
Well, yeah, they wanted to make sure that I wasn't flying over people, so they asked me, what's my plan? They wanted to make sure I had a space that was defined where I was going to fly, that was, there was some separation between people, and I had to show them a little map that I had designed, where that was outlined. And so it was kind of funny to like pack my drone into a Cessna and then take pictures out of the Cessna and then land and fly my drone. But yeah, this was really fun. This was the first Iditarod that we had this drone, so I was trying to use it wherever I could. So some of the stuff is not super exciting, but it was just a different sort of perspective, something we hadn't seen before. This was probably 2018, I think. Jeff might be able to recognize something there. I don't know. This is when they were in Shagaluk, so it was that course.
You said your first drone was
It was an DJI Inspire 2. I'm using that drone back there. It's a DJI Mavic 3 Pro. It's much smaller. It folds up. You can put it in a backpack and hike with it. This one, I mean, you had that giant controller there. Use an iPad. The drone itself is probably about 2.5, maybe 3 feet almost. It's really heavy, really noisy. The batteries didn't last that long. It took 2 batteries to fly. The image quality was great, but it was a little bit cumbersome. But it did perform really well. I mean, you can see some snow here, and it just does fine. Does fine in the wind and the snow, but you know, so do these new ones, these little ones. But yeah, this is on our the ADN YouTube page. You could find it there probably.
I know, it's great, isn't it?
That was really fun, and then I came back to town, and of course there's some sort of mayhem or something happening. This is when that truck ran into the bridge in Eagle River and messed up traffic for a while. We cover, you know, housing and the housing market and things, so we're always looking for photos of this kind of thing, and the drone really helps tell that story. This is the Coastal Wildlife Refuge. That's another thing, the Coastal Wildlife Refuge. You can't fly at Potter Marsh in the summer. They have it posted, the dates you can fly. You can fly in the winter because there's no birds, but I think that applies to the Coastal Wildlife Refuge in general, not just Potter Marsh. But they post those rules pretty clearly. This climber, she was a good sport. I don't think she was too worried about me flying this noisy giant drone near her, but I was a little worried, so I was a little farther away than I would have been otherwise, but it was fun to just experiment with a different perspective. You know, we use the drone for...
Really learn how to control the drone.
You know, it's surprisingly easy to fly. It's really intuitive, the controls, and if you're getting out of control, you just let go of the controls and it'll just hover. So I found it pretty easy to figure out. Now the composition is not quite perfect here. It's very symmetrical, and I'm not quite centered. So this is a case where it didn't quite work out the way I wanted. This is probably a better choice for that particular, you know, subject, given just my comfort with it. Because the wind will push it around. So if you're trying to get something very symmetrical, it may not be very easy. I was really concerned about flying over people. That was one of the rules that you have to follow. So it took me a while to get comfortable around people, but I've been experimenting with that. I started experimenting with that more. Here I was flying over the roundabout where there were no runners, so I was making sure I was away from everybody.
Can you sort of design a geotech of your own? Kind of like that?
I'm familiar with DJI drones. I'm sure other drones have other manufacturers have different rules, but you can set a radius. So, you know, in that situation at the heart run, you could say, don't go farther away than, you know, 20 meters from where you start from your takeoff point. And you can also set altitude restrictions for yourself as well.
20 mile.
Yep, 20-mile hooligan fishing. Anyone know where this is? Yes, Moose River, meeting the Kenai in Sterling. One of the other rules that you have to follow is flying at night. It used to be a lot harder to fly at night. You had to go through this whole process with the FAA, and now it's a lot easier. They've relaxed the rules. You need a strobe on your drone, and just so that, manned aircraft can see that there's something there to avoid. And there's some other rules to follow too, but it's a lot easier to fly at night. Really, it's a really great tool for putting things in perspective. This is the Ernie Turner Center in Eklutna. It was pretty new at this point, I think. This is the bell tower at APU. Some interesting sort of mid-century architecture. The Campbell Creek crossing near Lake Otis. Elementary school playground. HARP. So they have an open house every year. I would encourage everyone to go. It's pretty cool. I think it's in August every year. And so I drove all the way out there, had a little tour on the ground, talked to some people, and then I got my drone out, and this guy from the military comes over and tells me, you can't fly here. And I was confused because it was a military installation, and then they decommissioned it and gave the facility to UAF. But apparently they still owned the land. But then FAA controls the airspace. So I thought I was good to fly. He didn't think so. But we just had to call NORAD and it was all good. So I got to do my thing there, which I'm really happy I was able to do, because it's pretty amazing place. It was over at APU. Turning an arm. This is a Head Start preschool over in Muldoon. And I love this kind of thing. This is Begich Middle School, and it's something that I'm sure like you wouldn't notice if you're just there on the ground, but it's like a little Easter egg the designer or the architect put in there. This is the Kincaid Sand Dunes. The area right around the airport, you can't really fly very, very easily, but this was one little section where you can fly about 100 feet without too much trouble. Biggest challenge, like creatively, or? I mean, it's not as good of a camera as I'm used to using. So there's some technical limitations to the image quality. There's a very simple histogram. You don't have an RGB histogram. So sometimes dialing that in is not super easy. There's quite a bit of lag with the shutter. So you push the shutter and it doesn't happen right away. So there's a little trial and error there to anticipate that. There's some, regulatory issues flying around here in Anchorage with all the airports, but I don't know. I just really enjoy it. I don't know. I mean, it's a flying camera. Who doesn't want a flying camera? Yeah. And they're pretty affordable. I mean, Costco sells them, and a few $100s and you can have one.
400-foot tripod.
Yeah. At the Daily News, we always need photos of downtown, and so I'm always looking for different perspectives. Oops.
You don't really know what's going to happen till you go up.
Yeah, sometimes you have no idea what you'll see until you go up. I mean, I was here flying over Goose Lake, and I was looking at the lake, and then I thought, oh, well, let me go look over there, and this is cool. it's hard to tell what you're going to really see until you get up there. Flying at the port is a little challenging because that is Elmendorf airspace. So that's a much more involved process, getting a waiver from the FAA, which then requires you to contact the Elmendorf Tower and get permission. But it's a really important piece of infrastructure, so I've used that quite a bit. Right after the earthquake, I was using it to get some photos of them repairing some cracks at the bridge in Eagle River and the Mirror Lake Road. So speaking of not really knowing what you're going to see until you get it up there, I was in another part of town and saw the smoke. I didn't know where it was coming from, so I threw the drone up and saw, oh, sea galleys burning down. So I got this, and then I ran over there and flew the drone again much lower to get the firefighters sort of watching them put the hot spots out. Actually, one limitation of the drone, at least the one I have, is it doesn't do vertical. So you have to crop a vertical composition out of something horizontal. But it's about 20 megapixels, so it holds up okay, for my purposes at least. I go down to Juneau pretty regularly for the session, and I'm always tasked with getting photos of the ugliest state house capitol building in the country. I wish we had a dome or something, but it just looks like an office building. This is an old pump house where they used to pump salt water for the gold mines. Kodiak, beautiful, beautiful place. More architecture. I think this is a pretty new, this pedestrian bridge is pretty new. Yes. Yeah, I'll show some of that a little bit later. The challenge with that is the drone, like if there's wind, then it's going to move around a little bit. So if it's pretty calm, you can probably get maybe half a second, maybe a second. That's about as far as I've pushed it. This was a under construction hotel that I think it was an arson fire. This is one of those things where I didn't really know what I was going to see until I put the drone up. It's the AT&T Earth Station in Eagle River. Back to the Iditarod again. I'd take the picture right in front of the musher, and then I'd move just off to the side so I wasn't flying over them as they passed. It's kind of fun to try and make photos of the Iditarod ceremonial start and make it look like it isn't Anchorage, you know, so it's kind of fun with the drone. So this is the closest to a runway I've ever been with a drone. This is when they were redoing it. So because they're redoing it, they're not flying here, obviously. So I was able to get permission to fly right there and see some of that, and then get some photos of the infrastructure nearby. This is a piece of that, the wastewater treatment plant. And also some of the erosion that's happening to the coastal trail right there. Back to the port. Moose Pass. One thing that I personally like about some more landscape kind of compositions is seeing a little bit of the horizon. I think if you cropped that off, it just wouldn't have the same effect. So a lot of time I'll try and include some of the sky in these kind of compositions. The Mayor's Marathon, and then the half marathon. I threw this in there because it's, it's a part of the whale wall you don't really see because it's covered up by the building. But this was right before they were going to build the second bridge there, so I wanted to get a photo of the Eagle River Bridge before they built that. Portage Glacier, which I think is a national forest, so. This is actually a couple photos stitched together, which isn't something I can usually do very often, working for the Daily News. But this was a dry year at the golf course. And then again over same year over at the Butte, the Plant Materials Center. That same year too was we had the McKinley fire up near Talkeetna. And the drone was really useful telling that story. This was a little different situation too, as far as getting permission to fly, because this was it was still an active fire. They were still doing aerial firefighting. And so when they do that, they have a temporary flight restriction, a TFR. So that was basically off limits to all pilots. Nobody could fly their Cessna through there or anything. But the FAA has a process for the media to cover disasters. And so you can call their office in DC and get permission and then coordinate with the local firefighting people and get permission to fly there. So that was something new. That was the first time I'd done that. Something I loved about this Inspire 2 drone was the lens flare that it had. Kind of reminded me of my old Canon, some of my old Canon lenses. This was the solar farm up in Willow. And this was something I was trying. I haven't done too much of this, but the photo on the left is by my colleague Mark Lester. He took it during the earthquake. That's Vine Road, and he shot that from a Cessna, probably with a 200 or something. And I tried to recreate it a year later with the drone, so I'm flying, 400 feet with all I had was a 90, so didn't quite match up, but I don't know, it's kind of fun to experiment with that. It depends. So the drone I have now, it has three sensors, 3 cameras on it. The widest one has a variable aperture. So with that, I'll try and shoot at 5.6. The other ones, you can't change the aperture, so you're just shooting wide open, which is 2.8 or 3.4 or something like that. You don't really get a lot of depth. You don't get any out of focus areas really, unless you're really close. So I just shoot at 5.6 to just get everything sharp if I can. It gets kind of grainy up after like 1600 ISO, so kind of depends. This took a few tries to get it right, the timing, because you push the button and it doesn't quite, there's a little lag there. But this worked out pretty well.
You say there's 3 cameras on the drone?
No, you can choose. So with this new drone, you just push a button and it switches from the 24 to the 70, or there's a 166 equivalent. Which is great, because with the old Inspire, I had to come back and land and take the lens off and put the new one on, and that was not really ideal. But I love this mix of the sunset and then the artificial light. I just really like that look. This is up in Glen Allen. You have to get the timing right, because there's not a lot of shadow detail. It'll just go straight black unless you get it quite right. I think this was round 3 of the Iditarod with the drone. it was really handy to have the drone because we were flying. This is somewhere in the burn, I think. Jeff, you probably know where this is, but we saw them coming, we landed, and then I was able to wait and get the drone up just in time to get this shot. You could pay a helicopter pilot, what, $500 an hour to wait around, or we were paying our K2 pilot by the hour too, so it's a lot more cost effective to have a drone, even if you're getting a photo that you could get out of the window of an airplane. I always shoot raw unless I'm doing like high school sports or something. They shoot DNG files, so pretty easy to deal with. The other thing about the drone is, I mean, it opens up that 0 to 400 foot area, which it gives you a different perspective than you would get with an airplane. No, well, it could be, but it's manual. I do manual. Yeah. Well, I mean, at this point, I'm still using the Inspire 2, so it's full manual everything. I mean, you could adjust the aperture and everything with this. With the one I'm using now, yeah, you could use the ISO and shutter speed to control most of the exposure. This is an Ophir. I love those two little bikes up there. I did our Trail Invitational folks. Leaving Takatna. Cripple. Cripple is wild. It's just this swamp, and then for a couple of weeks it turns into this tiny little town in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Every time I've been there, I've been worried that the plane is going to sink into the snow and we won't be able to leave. Unalakleet. So this was right before the pandemic, and so we didn't even make it to Nome that year. Everything was shutting down. We didn't know what was going on, and came back to Anchorage, and like everything was just quiet and nobody was out, and parking lots were empty. Streets were empty. It was crazy. Except for the people who didn't like that it was closed, and then everything was shut down. They came out. Back again to the Eagle River Bridge. I tried for a long time to get photos from the ground with my regular camera, but I just wasn't able to see what I wanted to see, so the drone was just perfect for that. Vanderweel Farms. And this is on the park strip, and because it's so close to Merrill Field, I was only able to fly 50 feet. I mean, ideally, I would have been a lot higher to get a little better composition, but sometimes 50 feet is all you need. Like, if you can put the camera over the water at 50 feet at Westchester, like you can get something a little more interesting. This is a situation where I definitely did not need the drone, but given that it's the Spinard palm tree, I figured, anything goes, why not? I love seeing the mud flats there. And this is still the pandemic, so everything was shut down, and outdoor dining was like the only thing available. They had G Street shut down. This is when they were replacing the culverts under Northern Lights. can create motocross. This was one of the first times that there was a COVID outbreak on a boat. This was a fishing boat that was in Seward. And funny story, a few years later, I was on a boat almost exactly like this and got COVID, so. APU skiers up in Stuckagon Heights. Westchester. I find I just see things a little differently with the drone. I mean, I've been to Westchester a million times, and I don't think I've quite seen that. Even from the West High Hill, it doesn't quite look the same. Did anyone go to the ice carousel? They've had it out there at, I think it's around New Year's Eve. Somebody cuts this circle out of the ice and sinks a boat motor in it, and it spins around. It's pretty cool. Check it out next New Year's Eve if they do it again. Goose Lake. So the Inspire 2, the first drone that we had, they've used that to film feature films. You know, Hollywood used to use it. So it can go pretty fast. I think the fastest I've ever gotten it going was about 70 miles an hour with a tailwind. But you know, there's no way you could keep up with these guys. They're going 90. Hatcher Pass Lodge. This was something I had never seen before, but I guess they've been doing it a few years. This army of snow machines clears the snow off of the athletic fields at the high schools so they can get a couple extra weeks of practice in. Biking out to Knik Glacier. Yeah, I mean, I've seen Jeff's photos of Iditarod for years of the long shadows, and I've always looked for that when I was flying in the Cessna, but you can do a lot of that with this. Coming out of Whittier. So one of the rules that you have to follow, I mean, I kind of touched on some of them, but you have to keep your drone within sight, visual sight. So you have to be able to see it with the naked eye. You can't use binoculars to look at it. You have to be able to see it. So you can't go too far. This is about as far as I could go without. Yeah, I'm somewhere probably where this took off from. I photographed a couple. I don't know. One was the Aurora. I don't know what this. I've actually never been on the ferry. What was the question? In this situation? No. Because it's a vessel, like the port kind of thing. Do you know who was telling you that? I'm not sure what sort of Homeland Security rules would apply in this situation. In the lower 48, there's rules surrounding like stadiums and big sporting events. There may be some national security issues, you know, if you were near a military site. But like in this situation, I didn't run into anything at the Port of Alaska, Port of Anchorage. I haven't had any problems with that. So I'm not sure. I've photographed, you know, the refinery in Nikiski. Down in Valdez, never really run into anything.
Building.
Someday I'll go in there. I don't know if it's still standing. I'm sure somebody's done that. Yeah. Yeah.
Skiers going through the bunch. That's a great video. Skiers going through.
Mhm.
I know who shot that.
This is up in Ambler on the Kobuk River. This guy was riding his snow machine out on the water. I guess if you go fast enough, it doesn't sink.
Yeah.
I don't know. He seemed like he knew what he was doing. I'm sure he's sunk it before and it's fine. I don't know. We were out there doing a story on the Ambler Road, and this was a road out of Shungnak headed towards the Ambler mining district that just wasn't completed. But we did get to go out to the mine. This is the Bornite mine. We flew in on that helicopter down there, and then flew the drone up to get some shots there. Back at Ship Creek for the salmon derby. It's helpful to have the drone and kind of place it like right near downtown. That was nice. On the way out to the Eagle River Nature Center, first frost. We spent quite a while documenting the Eklutna River dam removal. So this was after they'd removed most of it, I think. And there was no way I was hiking down that. I mean, I don't know if I could have even. It would have taken hours, but it was also the first time I flew the drone to negative altitude, starting at 0 and then going down like negative 200 feet. That was kind of fun. Still the pandemic, so we need photos of hospitals. Oh, there's 2 hospitals there. Testing sites. This is up in Uktiagvik in November. So the sea ice is just starting to form, and it didn't even really look like water. It was like frosting or something. It was pretty interesting. Got to go up to Point Barrow on the edge of the Arctic Ocean. See the sea ice forming a little bit more up there. Not on that trip, no. I've seen lots of polar bears in Kaktovik. Not a lot of light at that time of year, but what there is really pretty. Clearing the ice road at Big Lake. Park Strip. And more COVID testing, of course. At this point, I was really trying not to get COVID because I had to fly to Unalaska and then isolate and keep testing so that I could get on a crab fishing boat. Spent 2 weeks on this boat, the Pinnacle, doing a story on crab fishing, and the drone was just such a great tool to have out there. For this project, we had some grant money that supported this reporting trip, and I bought a much more affordable drone, much smaller, much easier to deal with if I lost it, crashed it, or whatever, which I didn't, thankfully, but it was a DJI Air 2S, so much smaller, still had a pretty good camera, not nearly as nice as the the Inspire 2, but a lot easier to use. And it really, the benefit really showed itself with this photo. It really helped tell that story. And I was really happy to have it because we went places that we hardly ever get to go to, like St. Paul. So now we have these, drone photos of the community there. But like every trip, it seems like I come back to town and there's some sort of mayhem happening. Yeah, what is up with Eagle River? I don't. Yeah, thankfully nobody was hurt. I don't think there's too much structural damage, but that was pretty awesome to see with the drone. A while, yeah. The texture and the patterns is just so cool, and I love seeing the ski tracks on the side there. When Portage Glacier froze over, I was able to ski out there and then fly the drone right at the face. Having that much smaller drone, the Air 2S, which is, maybe a foot big and much quieter, I was able to get a lot closer to people and start using it just as a regular camera. I mean, I couldn't put myself there, but I could put a camera there with the drone. So I was just sort of experimenting with different ways of using it. Back down in Seward. Yeah. So after that, did another fishing story out in Bristol Bay with looking at salmon, obviously. Was flying the drone from one of these little tiny boats. They were all waiting for the opening. It was great to have it. I mean, we did some set netting stuff, and you could just, it's just a different way of seeing things. And we also went to Wood Tick Chick, which is amazing, amazing place. University of Washington has this research facility that they've had out there since the 50s, I think. And we went out with those scientists to try and figure out why it was such a productive season. And I learned some things like a stream like this can support 100,000 returning spawning salmon. It's amazing. It's these little tiny streams that feed into the, the Nushagak and big rivers like that really make the Bristol Bay returns so big. I mean, there's hardly even enough water for these fish to swim through, but they do. The next thing I'll show is a short video from Wood River in Bristol Bay. It has a lot of drone photos in it, and it has a scientist sort of explaining what's going on. So I'll try and get the audio going.
We're here in the Wood River system, which is a major tributary of the Nushagak River, which flows into Bristol Bay. We're probably about 350 miles west of Anchorage. Bristol Bay, of course, is home to the world's largest sockeye salmon fishery. And this year we're going to see something close to 80 million sockeye salmon return to Bristol Bay's rivers. That smashed the record that we saw last year, which was close to 70 million. If it had been the 70s, 1970s and 1980s, and you had predicted that 80 million fish would return in a given year, people would have laughed at you. It simply would not have seemed possible.
Here we live by the tide, and it doesn't matter if it's day or night. We don't have to think about, how much traffic there is or anything like that. What we have to think about is the fish in the net, getting them out of the net, making sure they're of great quality, not letting them sit in the net for very long, getting them delivered, getting them on ice. That's what we have to think about, is just the quality of these meals that we're providing for people. So when we get back to Seattle, we're suddenly thinking about, I don't know, it's a life on pavement. Here it's a life on the mud. And I think I am much more suited for a life on the mud.
This year, you know, it's usually a slowly kind of a tapered start, but we kind of took off about the 23rd, something like that in June.
happening fast once we get.
And the numbers started just popping up and just stayed up, you know, usually you get a little bit of a lull, but it didn't. This year just started early and kept running.
The surprising thing is that after 75 years of studying these systems, we're always humbled by not how much we know, but often how little we know. We think we have it figured out until we see something surprising. And this year's sockeye run to Bristol Bay and the Nushagak River in particular is going to go down as one of the biggest surprises in the history of Bristol Bay. The Nushagak Fishing District and its rivers are going to have a total of over 30 million fish come back to them this year. 30 million fish to these set of rivers is more than the Columbia River produced for all species of salmon in its heyday.
Prior to this year, our record was from 2008 when we had 230,000 pounds, which was an unheard of number. It was an impossible number. And so in 2019, we then had 262,000 pounds, and that it just didn't seem possible. And then the next year, it was 277, and it's just, it's a completely different scale. This year, we beat the 277. I don't understand how, and you know, my hands don't hurt enough.
I don't think we know what caused this huge run. One very plausible explanation is that the Bering Sea has warmed to the point that it's exceptionally productive for sockeye salmon from Bristol Bay. Well, we know the future is going to continue to warm. Society has to reduce how much carbon we emit to the atmosphere. That is the cause of the greenhouse effect. And even if we can reduce emissions with the snap of a finger now, the oceans have enough heat in them that they're going to be warm for decades into the future. So we are going to live in a warmer future, at least for the next few decades. At some point, for Bristol Bay sockeye, the ocean could become too warm. So there's a tipping point somewhere. And right now we don't know where that is. And we don't know where that is for most of the world's ecosystems. The fact that Bristol Bay has produced such exceptional numbers this year, I think demonstrates pretty clearly that ecosystems are sensitive to climate. And when we mess with climate, we mess with ecosystems. And in some cases, they have benefits to us. And in some cases, they cause some major problems. So to me, the future should look bright for Bristol Bay. The habitat is still here. The evolutionary capacity of these salmon is still here. And what we need to do is not push them too hard. We can hope for a future that isn't too hot, and we can hopefully protect the habitat and give them a fighting chance to continue to do well here.
I tried to throw everything I had at this story, you know, drones, underwater, GoPro, whatever. So it was really fun to work on. And the water is so clear. It was just, I was so glad I had that drone. Sometimes I use the drone when I just don't want to hike up the hill. I'll just, you know, throw the drone up. Or sometimes I can't hike there. You know, this is the Donlin gold mine. So the airstrip is a little ways away. I didn't have time to get out here, but I was able to fly the drone and get some photos of some actual drilling that was happening. Back in town, the Tudor bus barn. It's more fall colors.
So since you have to be able to visually see the drone, you use a really small drone, you can't see it as far, so you can't put out as far.
I guess so. But this, you know, but you can also put a strobe on it if you wanted to. I have a strobe I use for night flying, and sometimes actually I will put it on there, and I'll put it on the bottom so I can see it a little more clearly. But it's a lot easier to deal with the small drones. They're just a lot easier to fly. They're easier to just throw into your camera bag if you wanted to hike with it.
Why are they easier to fly?
They, the batteries last longer because they're not as heavy. They're newer, so the technology's improved. They're more stable. The Inspire 2, the first one I had was from 2016. That's when it was released. The technology has just improved so much that the newer ones are just easier to fly, just in general. I did not fly all the way from Anchorage out to Fire Island, but it was nice. I wanted to get the cities, you know, in the background. Not sure it quite worked, but it was all right. Those long shadows, just love those. Of course, the Sullivan Arena has been in the news a lot lately, so I needed to come back to this time and time again. This was for a story about parking lots, and didn't really realize how many parking lots we had downtown. This is not from this year, this is from last year, but we did have a lot of snow, so snow removal was part of that story.
I've seen city equipment moving snow.
Hmm.
So again, you're not directly above them. It's legal to they fly around them when they're piling up snow.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to be interfering with their work, you know, you should probably talk to them. But I mean, in this case, I wasn't getting in the way of anything. I mean, the FAA controls airspace everywhere in the country from the ground up. So technically, the FAA's they say who can fly and who can't, but I mean, there's other considerations. I mean, you want to be a good neighbor, and like NOAA has rules about harassing wildlife, so there's other considerations too. But generally, yeah, something like this, I've done a lot of that. Graders doing their thing and this kind of thing. A landslide in Juneau. I think this is Rondi sprint racing. My favorite bridge in town. I wasn't sure how the drone would handle the night stuff, but it held up pretty well. And I was far enough away, I wasn't worried about getting hit by a firework, but this was fun to try. I was more concerned about the helicopter that was flying around doing their own photography. No, this is real time. I'm pretty sure. It may have been sped up a little. I don't recall. Generally, I'm not really allowed to do that for ADN. So I don't think it is, but I mean, I could have sped it up for this. I'm not sure. One thing though is if you're doing video with the drone, there's no audio, so you'll have to figure out that part of it when you're putting together your piece. Back to Nome, the White Alice. Christy and Anna Barrington. Trailer, mobile home park in Muldoon. So eventually we did sell that Inspire, and we got this new Mavic 3 Pro, which I've been using here. And this is one of the telephoto cameras on it, which is really great to have. Lets you get stuff like this where you don't want to be too close. I would never fly a drone over the prison, but you know, it's in public, you know, people see this when they're flying by in their Cessna, so I think I'm well within my rights to take a photo of this, even though it's kind of a sensitive subject. Cooper Landing. You can buy it at adnstore.com. I think you can see some of the new road construction they're doing. They're putting in that bypass in the back there. Sometimes you never know what you're going to see until you get up there. Oh, one thing I should say is the cold. So I've flown the drone in as cold as -10 Fahrenheit. And when it's cold like that, I always, you have to make sure the batteries aren't too cold. So the drone will tell you how the temperature of the batteries, and I will take the drone up about 10 feet and just let it hover there until the batteries warm up to about 15 degrees Celsius. And only then will I start doing my thing. But in the cold, it still works, but the battery life is much lower. So I think I got maybe 10 minutes at 10 below. And I've heard people have flown it even colder and they get maybe 5 minutes. So you have to be aware of that. This was this is something that I used the drone for a lot this last winter. I love the birds. They're like, what is this flying thing?
They told me that they probably had to do some of that lumber inside there.
I love that it was the old truss plant and it collapsed. Yeah. So this was the wide angle, 24 millimeter. And then I was able to just switch that up to the 70 and get a different shot with during the same flight, which was really handy. And sometimes when you're out flying around looking at collapsed roofs, you just poke around and see what's out there, and you see some pretty stuff. But I really, really love that telephoto look from the drone. So back to the slow shutter speed, Jeff. Yeah, I think this was about a half a second. Maybe a second. That's really about as far as I've gone. And this was a very calm day. So I was able to just hover right there in between the two bridges. Then of course I had to return a few weeks later for that craziness. It's amazing how localized the fog is. You don't notice that unless you have a drone, really. But I've been really happy with the image quality from this new drone, even though it's a lot smaller and a lot cheaper than the old one. The technology's just improved so much. And it just lets you do things you can't do with a regular camera. The Cordova Hill. My favorite bridge. This was from a couple weeks ago up in Fairbanks. This was the T-Dog. It's a new dog mushing race started by Susan Butcher's daughter, Tekla Butcher Munson. It was kind of fun. It was started in Fairbanks, and it was mushing, ski joring, skiing, biking. So there was mushers, there were bikers, skiers. They did a 50-mile race to Nenana. And then there was also a 110-mile race. So some of them left Nenana and went back to Fairbanks. The battery life on this drone is pretty good, but it was not good enough for me to get a a car and a musher going by at the same time. I ran out of battery. On the way back, I stopped at Kastner Glacier, got some hikers. And Donnelly Dome. Donnelly Dome is part of the military, so you can't fly the drone there, but I'm outside of their space, so I feel like it's okay. Yep. Pipeline. That's it. Any questions?
During the summertime, how long does your battery last?
About 30 minutes, depending on what you're doing with it and, you know, some other considerations, the wind and stuff. Yeah.
You ever lost one?
I've never lost a drone. So I've had two impacts. One time when I was flying at the Eklutna Dam, they have a little area where they had set up a like trail cam basically to do some time lapse stuff. And they had a little platform about as big as this table, and I had to take off from there and go straight up through the trees and then go out over the river and then down. And on the way back, I clipped the edge of that and just broke a rotor. You know, I just had to replace that. And then the other time I was on the trawl fishing boat, and the way a trawl net works, the boat has to move forward to keep the net open. So it's always moving forward. And these drones, they have all these sensors. And so when you're landing, it'll stop at about 1 meter and it'll check everything, and then it'll go and land. Well, it was doing that while the boat was moving forward. So it slowly just crashed into the metal deck, and I just had to replace a rotor. But I've never lost a drone. I've never had any eagles interact with my drone. Definitely, you know, pigeons and gulls, but they don't. I mean, they've never attacked it. They just want it to leave. You know, they circle around it. I've heard of stories of, you know, some people maybe in Europe working with eagles and falcons to take out drones, but I've never encountered that. So, yeah. Oh, bye, Jeff.
Thanks, Lauren. That was really awesome. Imagery. But back to the boats. Just curious if you've ever done you always launch from jack from the ground. You launch it from where potentially you fire it up and kind of toss it, and then landing. You know, some of the imagery you take like a fishing vessel in the Bering Sea is really great during a storm, but launch and retrieving is really hard. Do you have any tips with that?
Sure. So the challenges with working off of a moving vessel like a boat is, one, it's made of metal, which totally messes up your compass and GPS. So you can calibrate the compass right before you fly, or maybe, I don't know, Glenn might have some suggestions too, but on the crab boat, there was a wooden part of the deck that I would launch from. So that got rid of some of the interference problems. And then I was able to catch it in my hand landing, so I didn't have to worry about that. I didn't learn that until after I had that little impact. I've never launched it from my hand. Sometimes I'll put it on top of my Pelican case, so it's on, you know, off of the ground a little bit. And you can also turn the sensors off. So that helps a lot on the landing part, as long as you practice first.
You mentioned some apps that are available in there where you can check to see about getting permission from certain entities.
Yeah, Aloft. So aloft.ai is the website, and they have an app that you can use. And yeah, ALOFT. And it'll ask you, are you a commercial pilot, Part 107, or are you recreational? And it'll let you request permission both ways. And when you pull up the app, it'll give you the altitude that you're allowed to fly in this particular area, and you can draw the boundaries of where you want to fly. So right here, you know, you could probably fly 200 feet or something.
Do you use one called Before You Fly?
I know that's one that the FAA has, and I've never used that. I haven't found it useful because it's a lot more restrictive on what it suggests that you can and can't do. A lot more restrictive than what I can do as a commercial pilot. As a commercial pilot, I fly, you know, is it controlled airspace or not controlled? So, and what class of airspace is it? Whereas Before You Fly, I think is like, how close are you to an airport? Which isn't really what I need, but it is a useful resource. This is 400 feet, but this is Merrill Field Class D, right? Yeah.
He talks about launching, bring that back. The drones have an amazing feature called return to home. It's very smart. So if the battery gets low, you're not paying attention, whatever, it will return to home. The problem is you're on a moving object.
Mhm.
Launch literally will land where you were.
Yes.
If you're on a boat, it will literally, it will crash into the sea. Yeah, you don't want to have it return to home.
Yes. That can be a handy feature to use if you trust it, and also if you set the return to home altitude correctly. Like if you have it too low, you may crash into a tree or a power line on the way back, or if you have it too high, you may run the risk of, you know, running into an airplane or something, depending on where you are. I don't trust it enough to use that feature. I know that that exists. I've only had to panic and use that once or twice. But another thing I do when I land is I orient the drone like I'm sitting in the cockpit of it. So the controls are more intuitive. So if I want to go backwards, you know, I'm pulling backwards on the stick. It's just easier for my brain. Yeah.
I have a question about changing perspective to be 50 feet, and things like that. There's the increased field position. So, how you know, to be big range, like,
I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing. With wildlife? The closest I've been to any big wildlife was with some muskox in Nome, and they could care less that I was there. I've never been near a bear with it. Like in a forest or something where there's these obstacles? Well, there's sensors on that will sort of give you a sense of how close you are to things, and it'll like warn you if you're getting too close. But I've been really cautious, and so I haven't really played around with that too much. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to crash it. And I'm especially cautious around animals. I don't want to, if I notice a change in their behavior, I'm just going to leave, pretty much.
But they really can't fly up the creek, you can't see the drone. So once it goes around a corner or something, you're not allowed to like fly by what you see and the screen. You have to
Yeah, technically, under the rules I fly on. I know some people use it's called FPV, first person view drones. They wear those. And they do some really cool stuff. I've never done that, so I don't have experience in that. And I don't know what the regulations are and how to do that legally. The closest thing I got there was in Eklutna River, because I was doing flying fairly close to the creek there. But I wasn't going around the corner or anything, but I was not going very fast. I was really nervous. Who all has a drone in here? Okay. Yeah.
What start DJI Air 3 for the money? My God.
Air 3. Yeah, that's what you have, right?
But there's the risk, government-made ground, all the DJI drones. Probably won't put it.
But I think something worth talking about is that the rules and the regulations and the laws about technology are way behind the technology. And the technology is advancing way faster than the rules can keep up with it. And so whatever exists today is going to be different tomorrow, and it'll be different again.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's likely not going to change anytime soon.
I mean, I am aware of the concerns about
DJI, since it's a Chinese company, but the drones are so easy to use and the image quality is so good that that's just what we've had. There are some other American made ones, but they're pretty expensive. Out of my range.
So I know, if you're out in public, there's no expectation of privacy. But I was walking along the road one day and this drone was following me. And I mean, if I had a gun, I would have shot it. Because I was freaked out. I mean, it was obvious it was following me. It made the friends that I made instead of going the other way. I mean, there's gotta be laws about that. I mean, that to me is harassment.
There could be, yeah, you could be right. And yeah, I mean, but that's a different thing as
Right,
compared to privacy.
right.
So there's harassment.
Is it okay to shoot down a drone then?
I don't care.
I mean, is there a law? I mean, if you did shoot one down.
Well,
Yeah, shoot down the drone in the municipality may.
Yeah, they consider it a drone.
You can't fire a gun into business.
Well, that's all right.
Yeah, but say you were in, insulin.
Okay.
Shot for drones.
Yeah.
Or it's like
Well,
a
there's-
big rock.
There's the FAA considers it an airplane, and they consider me a pilot operating the controls. And if you interfere with that, I mean, there's technically, you can have a $10,000 fine. I've never seen that ever happen. There may have been a case in Lower 48.
I think there was a case where somebody was flying the drone and looking or flying
Hey,
it
Tom.
next to the window of a house.
Yeah,
People actually, I think, did something like shut it down somehow.
I want to fly over the homes in Rainbow.
yeah, I've had some concerned people, not in Rainbow, but in Upper Dearman, concerned about that. But I mean, so yeah, if you're gonna use it, just be considerate of other people.
People like their privacy.
But I mean, technically, you're not supposed to shoot that.
You have to be a pretty good shot too.
The shot you took at Fire Island, looking back towards Anchorage.
I did.
You were in Anchorage when you.
No, I was in Fire.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we flew over there on a regular plane.
What was kind of the farthest distance from, that you could still have a view on your view finder or whatever it is that you're looking at in order to get how long does that stay, active?
Like the connection between the controller and the drone.
Yes.
Well, I started losing sight of the drone around half a mile, maybe a little bit more, depending on the conditions. But the connection is stable much farther. And you can go kilometers before it starts to degrade.
Wow.
Yeah, you're amazing.
Yeah, some people do that. I don't.
We're gonna
we're gonna cut it off here. Thank you so much for coming. That was great. So, anyway, big round of applause.
Thank you, Lauren.
Let's go to member slides, and we have a drawing to do, and we have to be out of here in 20 minutes. So that's the only reason I'm doing that.
I'll hang out a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Cool, thank you.
Yeah, he does have the drone over here if people want to take a look at it. Do we need a 5-minute break, or do you want to go straight into?
Let's go straight into it.
Okay.
Easier for me to edit, but
I can pause it if I remember to turn it back on.
Ready? Has anybody not got a ticket for the?
yeah, grab your tickets.
If you
You
are
have
a
to be a
member,
member, by the way, to get a ticket.
how many things?
Huh?
Yeah.
Keep it, that's what it is less than much, maybe two cards in it. I mean, I'd love to give away a lot of books, but I don't know, I'm just watching the clock and all because it gets.
No, I don't share, so that's what I did, I was,
Okay.
at that point, I was
sounds
did, but knowing that I did need trouble, but at the same time, I was feeling
Yeah,
threatened.
that's all I'm saying.
I'm a woman alone, I'm feeling threatened.
Stay
Stay the last guy,
Marie.
you can defend yourself. So that would be one of those situations.
I know,
that play out
I'm getting
court, I
excited.
No, I won't tell everybody out here if they're that close, you can use a slingshot or.
Yeah.
My eyes.
No, this guy was, I actually.
I just got back
Like,
from the eye
I-
doctor and I need a new
I
prescription
don't-
and
I think it was just
I'm
something
like,
out there, like, I don't think it was anything. But Jen did ask me if I turned around and flashed the bird, I said, of course I did. Right. Right.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was several years ago, and I wasn't sure, I just know I felt without threats. So, it doesn't take, it takes a lot. But that was also the first time that. I mean, it had to.
Okay, so everybody get their numbers out. We're gonna do the drawing first.
Tickets? Anybody need a ticket?
You need a ticket?
Okay.
Oh, who's got it? I just, no, that's why you were in there. Yeah, I was working on it, it's about 3 years. Okay, but that's why I said. Yeah, well, not that I worked. Yeah, I know, I'm like.
Okay, you guys ready?
440.
Oh.
Amber, you want a book or a Stewart's?
I'll take the Stewart's gift card.
Wait, there's your photo.
Yeah. Oh, sure. But I'm sure. I'd like to get it. It's fine.
444.
Ooh, missed me by one.
120 to 29. One more buck. 452.
Oh.
Don't go back.
All right, we're gonna go straight into member slides, and I do believe. Oh, we have Carl Johnson's photos too. Where's Carl lighting? I'll get the light.
Yeah.
No, you don't do it.
Yeah, whatever. Right. Try this one. Not a hearing. Right. Learn how to use it.
Len, are you still recording or is it on pause?
So is it Carl? Hey, this is Carl Johnson's pictures. Like how his last year. There we go.
Okay, this is Carl, photos from, that picture, where it is.
Oh, this is when he went out to,
Reading past lunch.
yeah, Rainy Path Lodge. That's a nice shot. Okay.
Okay, great. Just got 5 slides. And, this was out in Prince William Sound. And I ran across this black bear and he really looked distracted. So I'm going, what the heck's going on? He said, he just got a notice from the IRS, they're gonna, audit the last 3 years of his tax returns. So he really looked confused. And so, but he said he's very hungry and he's out looking for some chum salmon, since the chum salmon were running. So I said, okay, go ahead and go find your chum. So he said, oh my gosh, where the heck are these salmon? Got it? Where can I find a chum salmon? Oh, I know. They gotta be in the water because they're salmon. So they gotta be in the water. All right, now I know where I'm gonna get that chum salmon. I got you by that tail. And man, do I love your eggs. Now, what the heck? I mean, give me a break here. I mean, I've never seen anything like this.
That's pretty cool.
I mean, what's he doing? I mean, hello, you idiot, the damn fish is right in front of you.
All right.
All right, well, thanks everybody for coming out. We now have 10 minutes to put this room to look like, just like it did when we got here. Don't forget, next month, Julie Justin's gonna be doing his light show on Around the World with Cats.